Hey, you summoned a lesser maker. Today is Thursday. The last video is actually doing pretty good. It's the first week of school for the kids. So I have 40 minutes to start designing this Mordheim board before I have to pick them up. But first, I'm gonna change into something more comfortable. All right. I actually designed this shirt. Link in the description if you want to support the channel. This Mordheim board is going to be a little different this week. I wanted to try a more modular design this time, just so that you guys can know how to do it. And it's going to be new to me. I have never done this before. So let's do it together. This probably goes without saying, but I sketched this out in 4 seconds, but that's mostly because I've been thinking about it for several months. I've been looking at a ton of reference photos, and this is only my third board ever.
If you're looking for inspiration, watch Minecraft, specifically the builders. Give a really good crash course on city planning and stuff like that.
Hopefully that helps you design your own board. It helps me design mine. So if you need any questions answered, or if you need ideas on maybe what to do next, I have a Discord. You can bounce ideas off of me anytime. I'm an open book. That's one of the perks of having a tiny channel.
I took the template I drew out and I made a 1-to-1 image of it in Illustrator. That just helped me grasp it a little better, and I was able to make sure that it was modular with my other templates because I have AI files of those as well. We're using spray foam to adhere the Lowe's project board to just some regular packing foam, and we're using barbecue skewers to make sure that those don't move. Just be careful not to stab it through the bottom like I did, because sometimes the spray foam will just keep expanding and it'll find gaps and stuff. Just be aware of that. I'm grabbing some regular foam core, and I used a miniature to see what height the wall should be, and now we're just going to cut that out. You'll see what we use that for in a second. Okay, so with more spray foam, we're going to stick that foam wall to the base of these foundations, and make sure you use skewers for this and that it has a flat surface on the bottom, just to kind of make sure that everything's the same height. Sometimes I had to pre-bend the foam core, other times it didn't really need that. Obviously, if everything's a straight edge, it doesn't need to be bent into shape. So those straight edges were a lot easier than those curved ones. And I used a lot of skewers. So now this is the side path, and this was drawn onto the template. We're going to be putting stairs in here later, and I just used a hacksaw to get through the foam here. One of the big features I want for this foundation is some foam core cobblestones. In the last build, I used this on a build, and I really wanted to experiment it and see how it scaled. So we're gonna really put this to the test. I'm using the black foam core I usually use, as well as the Dollar Tree foam core, just to make sure that it looks the same. And by the end of it, it did look kind of interchangeable. So if you'd bought that link of black foam core, you'll have that comfort of knowing that it's easily used here. we're going to be cutting out some bridges like we did in that concept sketch. And I looked up some medieval bridges, and especially cobblestone ones. They typically have a really wide arch, and they get really thin in the middle. So that's kind of how I was trying to make these. And because I cladded a lot of these with foam core cobblestones later, they didn't get quite as pencil thin as I liked. But I do really like the shape of them now. I have a square punch that I made out of a brush handle, and we're just going to be punching all the streets. This is something I've done on all my other boards as well. This was actually an idea of Devs and Dice, and he has a really great channel. I'm sure you found his channel before mine, but if you haven't, go check out Devs and Dice because he has a really great Mordheim board, and he has a lot of really great tips and tricks for Mordheim terrain. I'm cutting out all the wall sections now where the bridges meet the foundations. And I'm also refining the bridges a little bit here, cutting in steps with some X-Acto knives, and you can really see how it's really starting to take shape. I'm really getting excited. So we're gonna test out two different methods of this foam core cobblestone. I mixed my Mod Podge spackle mix with the foam core bricks, and then I put them into place. My thought here was that I would have to add the grout after I glue down the foam core, and if I did it all in this step, then it would I would only have one dry time. However, it did muddy up the cobblestones a little bit, and I think gluing down the cobblestones separately and then putting the spackle over it to fill in the gaps was the much better method to get it to look a little more consistent. And I mean, I worked hard for those cobblestone textures, and when you mix it up together, it does definitely muddy it up a bit. So I definitely recommend gluing down the cobblestones first and then going back in with the spackle. And you'll see me doing that later. As far as laying down cobblestones, this just takes forever. I haven't ever done anything like this, and I was on the phone with my twin brother, and he was saying, why don't you just print a texture roller? Mostly, I don't have like a texture paste that would accept a texture roller at the moment, and I've never done that before, and I know I can make this work. So when you only have a week to do every build, you typically find the fastest way or in the most simplest way to do things. So now we're going to kind of thin out those bridges a little more because of the thickness of the cobblestones, and we're gonna cut a ton of cobblestones now. This took a long time, and there's really no fast way of doing it, but you just shake them and tumble them. And now I'm gonna start applying these to the outside walls. I ended up only doing this on a couple, and I tried out a different method on several different walls here. So we'll take a look at those later. I definitely think the cobble is my favorite, but if you're not into that look, then I have a couple other methods of making these foundations. So you can see here, I'm using the bottle of the Eileen's tacky glue to kind of place the cobblestones when the glue is still super wet. Then when it kind of hardens and starts getting tacky, you can kind of do it with your finger and make sure everything's flat. When you're kind of puzzling these cobblestones together, they typically try to raise themselves off of the surface, and you definitely want to make sure that they're really flat and not kind of bubbling up in certain areas. So I carved in steps on these bridges, and I'm gonna try really hard to make sure that those cobblestones are really flat, so that when we get there and we put models on this, they'll have spaces to stand. On some of these bridges, though, I'm gonna probably have to extend the step a bit with another cobblestone or two, just to make sure that they're solid on their base. On this wall, I just cut strips of cork, put in support struts, and then lined the cork along the top of the wall to make sure that all the foam core surfaces are covered. Now we're gonna go in with some air dry clay, and we're gonna put in all of the sidewalks. I know this isn't particularly accurate to a medieval city, but I think it just goes a long way to kind of play with the textures a little differently, and it's something I like to add to my boards. And once you make one modular board with one thing, you kind of have to do it with the other ones. So it's something I like to do, and I just do this with air dry clay, and that's mostly what I recommend for this. And then I went in and carved all the concrete, like pour lines, mold lines, I guess. And then I finally got some spackle, and we're gonna smear this across the top of all of these cobblestones. All the packing foam I'm covering with this grout texture to kind of hide that surface. And then anything that's not covered with this grout texture is going to be covered with a different texture paste later. This wall, I kind of came up with the idea of if Tudor walls were good enough for houses, maybe it's good enough for this foundation. And this actually became one of my favorite walls, and it's a little different. I did find some reference photos where this was used, so if you're looking for something accurate, this technically I'd seen photos of this being used. I don't know how long it would last though, but anyway, I mixed up a texture paste for this other foam side, and man, this looked like a chocolate frosting. Okay, so finally I primed this all black, and I was able to see what it looked like with a dry brush. And because I covered up everything with grout, I was really worried everything was going to be one surface. Luckily, the cobblestone texture turned out really cool. Was it worth the time? I think I would definitely try to find a texture roller for this large of a surface, but now I know that I'm good at it, and if it's something that I need to do in the future, I know that I can do it. So I always like to try a new method every time I do something anyway, so... All right, so this is how it turned out. I'd just like to take a second to thank my Patreon members, Leroy, Moonbad, Feder, Caracal, Old School FRP, and Burning Heart Creations, our newest patron. Thank you guys so much. It goes such a long way to help with morale and funds for these weekly videos. We also did a pre-release over on Patreon for next week's STL pack. So they got it a whole week early. And right now I'm gonna show you a preview of our Patreon exclusive narrative battle report. I'll leave you to that, and I hope you guys have a good one.
Camphor had finished a burial ritual for a fairy when her body went rigid and she looked north. Her opaque and orange-tinged wings widened and stiffened. Her chin lifted and her brows furrowed in concentration. There was danger somewhere close. Then I felt the insides of my stomach twist and turn. Cam turned to me and looked into my green eyes. I felt it too, I assured her. Worry laced her hazel eyes. Not far behind, the twins came up to us, no doubt feeling the pull and the disturbance too. There was something sinister far too close to the forest, and it's our duty to keep those dangers out. So for the safety of the forest, we made our way towards the north, as if we were being pulled and tugged along by a rope. I didn't particularly like the feeling of being leashed, and always have, but nothing comes close to the hate I harbor for those who harm the forest. Camphor led us, and the twins whispered in their tongue behind me. They walked closely next to each other as always, their wings identical to Cam's and mine, swaying from side to side in unison.